Hey everybody, welcome to Pig Dr. Osborne's Brain. It's another Monday night, super excited. We've got a great topic. Gluten withdrawal syndrome is what we're going to be diving into tonight. Before we get into the show though, I'd like to make sure that that all of you are sharing this with somebody who may struggle, who you may suspect may be struggling with gluten problems. So make sure you use that share button and pass this on to somebody who could benefit from it. Also, let me know where you're from. So chime in, let me know, say hello, let me know where you're coming from in the world, and we're going to get going tonight. One of the things, I found this sign. I was actually on a road trip here recently, and I thought I would share this with you. You can't make this kind of thing up, but the sign said grain terminal. And of course, I'm a punster. I love those plays on words. And so grain terminal, as in grain is terminal, not the terminal where they store grain. But what I'd like to do as we're talking tonight, if going grain free, if going gluten free has saved your life or has altered or changed your life dramatically for the better, I'd love to hear you chime in and say, yes, it saved my life. I'd love to hear your feedback on that, because so many people don't realize that, that going grain free can actually as we go through the show. So again, love that grain terminal. That was on the way. That was up in North Texas on the way to Colorado. I took a road trip a couple of years ago with my dog and saw that sign. Anyway, thought I'd share that with you. So we got Paula from Washington, and wow, okay. Pina says, yes, I had a baby once I went gluten free. I've seen that in the office, in the clinic. I mean, I can't tell you how many times I've seen people struggling with fertility issues once cutting out grain, hormones normalize, and we actually end up with more babies, right? Marianne says, yes, in so many ways. Connie says, yes, it has dramatically changed my life. Marie Louise from Turnbridge Wells, Kent, United Kingdom. Welcome across the pond. Let's see here. Misty. Hey, Misty, how you doing? Good to see you on the show tonight. Jackie from the OC, Orange County, California. Deanna from New Hampshire. Marie from Toronto, Canada. So we got a couple of different countries being represented. We got Pina from Staten Island, New York. And Nora says, withdrawals from dairy are real. Didn't realize how addicted I was to it. Yeah, we're going to be talking about that, so stay tuned. And then Maddie from Australia, Brisbane, Australia. And let's see here, Nora from Alberta, Canada. A lot of audience tonight from Canada. Okay, so let's see here. Love it. Rita says, yes, inflammation on my fingers stopped and I lost 40 pounds. Len from South Australia. Wanda coming in from Tennessee says it changed her life. And love it. Love hearing all these stories and seeing all these stories. Michelle, hi from Australia. I'm a celiac, and since going gluten-free, I've put weight on. And many people will, right? There's weight loss and there's weight gain. And some people fall on the spectrum of when they're gluten sensitive and they're eating gluten, they fall on that spectrum of weight gain. And some fall on the spectrum of weight loss. They're malnourished. They can't keep the weight on. So depending on what you're struggling with. So, all right, let's dive in. Let's get started. So tonight, let's see here. Here it is. All right, I lost it there. So we're going to be talking about gluten withdrawal syndrome, or GWS for short. And a lot of people, what happens, a lot of people go gluten-free. And they really, really struggle with a lot of different types of side effects. Some of the things that we see people struggle with include general malaise, fatigue, shakes, severe headache swings, gastric pain, and bloating. We'll see periods where some people have severe diarrhea. We'll even see low-grade fevers. So these are some of the more common symptoms of going gluten-free and having a gluten withdrawal, meaning a lot of people do this. They go gluten-free and they're like, why do I feel worse? And that scares them. So going gluten-free initially scares them. They think, oh my gosh, I can't quit eating gluten. I feel so much worse than what I felt before. And the reason it scares them, obviously, is all those symptoms are terrible. They're horrific. Now, one of the reasons why these symptoms can occur, one of the biggest reasons why they can occur, is that there are proteins in gluten, or subfractions of gluten, if you will. One category is actually called gluteomorphin, and we'll get that on the screen for you. Gluteomorphin is a breakdown byproduct of fragmenting the gluten protein, and it acts like an opioid. Now, if you've ever taken opioids or ever taken pain medications, you know that opioids can have widespread effects. But with some people, especially those with chronic pain who've been on opioids for any length of time, getting off of them can cause a severe withdrawal. The fevers, the shakes, the headaches, the irritability and mood swings are very, very common in opiate withdrawal syndrome. And remember that gluten can act like an opiate. The gluteomorphin itself is a form of opioid that interacts with your opiate receptors in your brain and in the rest of your bodily tissues. So if you've been eating gluten a really long time, there is merit there. You can be opioid addicted as a result of consuming gluten. So that gluteomorphin, again, as an opioid, especially in those with gastrointestinal damage, we see very, very commonly that creates again, a withdrawal syndrome or a withdrawal problem. Let's see here. So the withdrawal itself can make you feel worse because gluten proteins can mimic morphine, which is a form of opiate, which causes a drug withdrawal in a sense. Now, the same thing can happen with dairy. Many people don't realize this, but dairy has, there are different types of proteins in dairy, very, very similar to that in gluten. One of them is casomorphin, which is another opiate, another food-based opiate, where we can see withdrawal-like symptoms as a result of trying to discontinue using dairy products as well. And in my experience, I actually see more issues with dairy withdrawal than I do with gluten withdrawal. In essence, the morphine compound in dairy is actually, and again, in my experience, stronger and creates a greater degree of side effect when people are trying to kick it or cut it out of the diet. Now, if you missed our show on dairy, I highly recommend you go back and check out the Pick Dr. Osborne's Brain archives. And if you're not familiar with that, you can go on over to YouTube, youtube.com/glutenology, and you can check out the archives there. But I did an entire show on dairy, and we talked about the morphine compounds in dairy as well. So I want to pump up a study here. What this is showing, what we're seeing here, is a research study. And I've highlighted a section, and if you can't see it, some of you are on your phones and some of you are on your computers, but if you're on a big screen, you can read this. Gluten can be degraded into several morphine-like substances named gluten exorphins. These are morphine-based compounds. These compounds have proven opioid effects and could mask the deleterious effects of gluten protein on gastrointestinal lining and function. Now, the reason I highlight this and bring this up too, I want to talk about kind of two sides to this, is that one, going gluten-free, you can actually feel worse. And one of the reasons why, again, is because gluten has an opiate effect, and as its opiate effect can act as a pain reduction or a pain inhibitor. It changes the way that we perceive pain. So when you're getting that opioid out of your diet by going gluten-free, the pain can come in. You can develop gastrointestinal pain, joint pain, and other problems because, again, the gluten that was creating the damage was also masking its own toxicity. And so that's what this is saying, is that the opioid effects can mask the deleterious effects of gluten protein on gastrointestinal lining and function. It can do it in other organs as well. In essence, gluten could mask its own toxicity by exorphins that are produced through gluten protein digestion. So again, a lot of people, when they go gluten-free, they're taking away that morphine pain reduction, if you will. They're taking away their pain pill. And so the damage of all that gluten consumption, the years of gluten consumption, can come flooding in because, again, they're basically removing the morphine compound. So very, very important, because many of you that struggle with chronic pain. One of the reasons I wrote No Grain, No Pain wasn't just to address pain, but it was also to address the issue of grain creating hormone pain, grain creating physical pain, grain creating a number of different disruptive pains, psychological pain, etc. But for people with physical pain who are under pain management, and so they're on drugs like OxyContin, they're on drugs like Dilaudid or morphine, these heavy hitters, or codeine, you know, this is one of those areas where if you've been under pain management, you're eating a food that can create pain and it can mask its own pain in a sense. And when you remove it, the pain can come flooding in. And so people tend to gravitate toward pain medications at that point because they're just trying to get some type of alleviation from their symptoms. And so you have to understand that gluten withdrawal syndrome can last. So how long can we really see it last? I've seen it last as long as 4 weeks. But for most people, it's 1 to 2 weeks. So I would say if you're going gluten-free for the first time and you're feeling worse and not better when you make the transition into the diet, you've really got to be strong for a couple of weeks. The next question is, what can we do to overcome that opiate-like withdrawal syndrome? In essence, what are some of the things that we could do to kind of offset that if we're trying to not be quite as symptomatic in this sense? And one of the things that I highly recommend is vitamin C. Now, vitamin C has several different functions, and one of its functions, biochemically speaking, is in the production of a neurotransmitter called dopamine, which is our happy hormone. And so a lot of times, again, people with gluten-induced damage have vitamin C deficit, and so they have dopamine deficits. If we actually measured dopamine, measured vitamin C, we would see those levels being low. And these people are even more susceptible to the gluten withdrawal syndrome because, again, they're not producing adequate dopamine. So vitamin C is a rate limiting step for dopamine production. You actually need vitamin C to be able to properly produce dopamine. So again, vitamin C deficiency can cause dopamine deficiency, which can lead to heightened sense of pain, heightened sense of withdrawal when you're removing that gluten. So vitamin C can be a very effective tool. My advice, 150-pound adults, 5 to 10 grams a day if you're going through gluten withdrawal syndrome is a good dose kind of to think about starting with. Now, for some people, and that's in split dosing, don't take all 5 or all 10 grams at once. It can cause diarrhea if you take too much at once. So split that dose into 2 to 3 gram doses, you know, throughout the course of the day with a couple of hours in between the doses. Now, vitamin C, again, it can cause looser bowels, and some people don't need 5 grams. Some people can get by with only 2 or 3 grams. So it's one of those things that you titrate the dose up to bowel tolerance. So if it's creating diarrhea at lower doses, that's a kind of a sign to you that probably you're beyond your spectrum of capacity to tolerate more vitamin C. Now, another thing that can be very, very helpful in this scenario, and one of my favorite go-tos, is niacin. And niacin is also known as nicotinic acid. It's also sometimes referred to as vitamin B3. And niacin is very, very powerful to help people who are going through withdrawal. And it doesn't matter whether you're going through gluten withdrawal syndrome or whether you're going through drug withdrawals, like actual opiate drugs, or if you're going through alcohol withdrawals, or if you're going through other, you know, addictive drug-based withdrawals. I've seen people with caffeine withdrawals do well with niacin. I've seen people with nicotine addiction issues do well from withdrawals with niacin. Niacin is very, very effective. It's actually one of the most utilized tools in functional medicine for functional medicine doctors to recommend people who are going through drug detoxification protocols or drug detoxification withdrawals. And great question, Nora. Nora's asking, flushing or non-flushing? Flushing niacin. So I'm going to, you know, again, there's niacin in the form of nicotinic acid, which is what you want. You do not want the nicotinamide, which is the non-flushing version. You want nicotinic acid as the form of niacin. The others are just not as effective, and that dosing can widely range between 250 and 500 is generally what I like to see people doing, but some people go up even as high or much higher, and those are milligram doses. Some people go up much higher. This is one of those things done to tolerance. Niacin can cause a flushing reaction. It vasodilates the blood vessels in the skin. So what kind of a niacin flush, those of you who've ever experienced it, I know what I'm talking about, but those of you who've never experienced it want to try it. It starts with tingling and kind of a little bit of tingling at the top of the head, and it slowly works its way down. and it creates a hotness or heat. And then some people describe it as an itching. So a heat or an itching sensation. It can make the face and turn very, very red and splotchy. Some people think they're breaking out in hives when in actuality it's a niacin flush that's occurring and they've just never experienced it. So they're kind of alarmed by it. But if that's happening where your skin is turning blotchy and red and it kind of goes all the way from your head all the way down to your feet, and it takes about 45 minutes to push through your whole body, that's called a niacin flush. And it's a very, very common reaction, but it can be a very, very effective tool at beating back, again, the toxic symptoms of gluten withdrawal syndrome. So again, getting that niacin and that vitamin C within your protocol if you're really, really struggling with bad gluten withdrawal symptoms. Again, what are those symptoms? Predominantly, those symptoms are going to be mood swings, irritability, increased pain. We can get headaches. We can get muscle spasms, muscle cramps, neck tightness. We can get things like diarrhea, gastric bloating, intestinal discomfort. Those are all part of, or can be part of, the withdrawal process. And I've even seen, again, low-grade fevers. Some people get the shakes or the chills as a symptom of withdrawal, going through the withdrawal as well. Just so think of it as any drug withdrawal, because gluten is just as powerful as a drug in its gluteomorphin form, and it can create these types of problems. So again, be aware that that's one of the mechanisms of action of what we see with gluten withdrawal syndrome, or GWS, is we're abbreviating it here. So one of the other things that happens, though, when people go grain-free, and so those of you who haven't read No Grain, No Pain, you owe it to yourself to go pick up a copy. If you've not heard of it or you've not seen it, you can pick it up at any major bookstore. It's an international bestseller. You can pick it up on Amazon.com. You can get it on your Kindle. You can get it on Audible. But grab your copy, and if you do, send us the receipt, and we'll send you a free leaky gut guide. And so just let us know. I'm happy to send that for you. It's about a 68-page leaky gut guide that kind of goes along with the book. But so again, you owe it to yourself to pick that up if you haven't already. And I talk in the book about when people are going gluten-free or going grain-free, one of the things that can happen that is not part of the morphine-like component, it's not part of the gluteomorphin issue, is that if somebody has a pre-existing yeast problem, and a lot of people do, so a yeast overgrowth, when you cut grain out of the diet, what you in essence are oftentimes doing is, if you have a pre-existing yeast overgrowth, is you're starving the yeast. Yeast thrive on grain-based carbohydrates and other carbs. So when people go grain-free, a lot of times those yeast who are used to getting all that food start starving, right? And when they start starving, they're life forms. They want to survive. They want to live. They're just like you. And they're smart. And so they can actually create and trigger changes in neuronal chemistry within your gut that make you crave sugar, that make you more irritable, that make you want to eat foods that you shouldn't eat. It can feel like withdrawal symptoms as well. And so you can get cravings, massive cravings, especially for sugar. So kind of think about it like, whereas gluten will more so not create so much the cravings, gluten withdrawal, it'll create more of the other side of the equation. If there's a pre-existing yeast overgrowth, a lot of times that when you have those severe sweet or sugar cravings, you might consider that you're not going through gluten withdrawal, but that you actually have a pre-existing yeast overgrowth as well that needs to be dealt with as you're trying to take and change your diet. So those of you who don't, who suspect that, and one of the things that you can do, there are a number of different signs for yeast overgrowth that are can be physically present on the body. One is, look at your toenails. A lot of people have like a white flaky crust under their toenails or fingernails. That's oftentimes indicative of a yeast overgrowth. Some people will have a really white, thick coating on the tongue. That can be a sign of yeast overgrowth. Jaundice in the eyes or yellow discoloration of the skin can be a sign of yeast overgrowth. Rashes, unexplainable rashes coming up on the skin, oftentimes are manifestations of yeast overgrowth as well. And then couple all that with sugar cravings. That's kind of a sign that may be part of the issue or part of the problem. And so if you've got a yeast overgrowth, you're going to struggle even potentially going on a grain-free diet, because those yeast, as they start dying off and their cell membranes start breaking open inside your body, inside your GI tract, are releasing toxins, and you can get a what's called a Herxheimer response, named after the doctor who first coined the term, Dr. Herxheimer. But it's basically, it's a detoxification reaction. So as those cells are dying off, they're releasing their chemical toxins. Then your body's having to cope and deal and adapt with all of that. You can feel quite horrible. So this is another manifestation. If you feel bad going gluten-free, you could have gluten opioid withdrawal syndrome or gluten withdrawal syndrome, but you could also have a pre-existing yeast overgrowth. And so cutting out grains leads to a massive kind of uprising, if you will, of yeast. And then once they uprise, they kind of create a lot of symptoms as they start kind of creating a neurological message to make you change your mind about what you're eating. But they can also, again, as they start dying off, they can release their chemical toxins that now your body has to process and deal with. And that can be a struggle for many people as well. So if you are looking at, how do you get rid of yeast? There's one of the formulations that I highly recommend for those of you struggling and you want some support around your yeast overgrowth is something called Yeast Shield. You've got to be careful with supplements, especially those of you who are new to gluten-free, trying to go gluten-free. Look, a lot of brands of supplements have rice powder and other grains in them. That's where you really have to be careful because you can get exposure to those things. And if you do, it can derail your grain-free, your gluten-free diet. And that's something that we obviously want to try to prevent. So Yeast Shield is a formulation that's very, very potent. It can deliver quite a punch, so to speak, to help you with that. And so you can pick that up at glutenfreesociety.org. It's simple. Just type in Yeast Shield in the search box and you'll pull it right up. But that can be a very, very effective tool. One of the other things that you can do that can be a very effective tool, both for gluten withdrawal syndrome and for what we'll call pseudo gluten withdrawal syndrome with a yeast overtone, is probiotics, strong doses of probiotics. Probiotics provide a competition for yeast overgrowth, so they can suppress the ability and the capacity for yeast to overgrow. But in addition, remember that probiotics, and we say probiotics, I'm talking about good bacteria, Lactobacillus, Bifidobacter, different species and strains, actually are responsible for making serotonin and dopamine. Remember earlier I was talking about vitamin C, and I said that vitamin C deficiency can lead to dopamine deficit, and that's also true of probiotic deficiency. If you don't have adequate quantities of good bacteria, you can have a harder time producing neurotransmitters like dopamine and serotonin, and that can also lead to perceived neurochemistry or a change in perception of the way you think and feel based on the alteration of your neurochemistry. Remember, 90% of serotonin is made by your gut. 60% of your dopamine is made by your gut. So very, very important. A lot of people think those things are made in the brain, and they are, but more of it is made in the gut. And that's why a lot of people with gluten gut-induced damage and with gluten-induced microbiome changes really, really suffer with neurological symptoms. It's actually neurological coming from the GI tract in many cases, not in all, but in many cases. And this is one of those cases. So Biotic Defense is a solid probiotic. It's not going to have any dairy, and it's not going to have any forms of grain, or grain in it. I'm not sure I understand your question. Nancy's asking, is it better prebiotic? Rephrase that, Nancy. Not quite sure I understand what you mean as you're talking there. Okay, so Veronica's chiming in. I just tried your suggestion, flaxseed meal as my new oatmeal substitute. Thanks so much. I was trying to use kitchen fix almonds and seeds as breakfast, but then I noticed in the book you actually said that too many nuts and seeds on a damaged gut is not a good idea. I've read the book 3 times in the span of 6 months, and each time I catch something I missed the first time. Love it. Yeah, I mean, read it more than once because that book is the culmination of about 16 years of knowledge that came out of my brain. That's why we have the Pick Dr. Osborne's Brain Show every week. It's the knowledge doesn't quit coming, but the book is 16 years of accumulation of knowledge and experience. So I'm glad you found that helpful going back through it. Yeah, so let's see here. The next question coming in. Yeah, Marianne saying, yeah, she's to the point I was talking about. She says, less inflammation since going gluten-free, still have cravings. I'm pretty sure I have yeast and or bacterial issue. And that's a very strong possibility. Again, the best way to know is to test. If you're working this on your own at home, if you're do-it-yourself doctor at home just trying to figure this out, use No Grain, No Pain as kind of your platform. And if you hit a plateau and you can't figure it out, Now it's time to go visit a functional medicine doctor, and that, you know, that's somebody who can run objective types of laboratory to help give you more specified information about what actually is going on inside of you. So Pamela, I didn't autograph that book for you last week. I'm sorry. You know, bring it into the office if you're around, and I'll be happy to put a John Hancock on it for you. Calling me out. I should have autographed it last week. Pam, she answered the right question, and we sent her a free copy of No Grain, No Pain, which, by the way, I'm going to give away another free copy tonight. So be on your toes, because I've got a question that we're going to pump out here in just a minute, and the person who gets it right gets the copy. So, can gluten cause vitiligo? That's the question that Michelle Hart is asking. Man, I love that. This is actually one of the most aggressive topics on glutenfreesociety.org. We have a few different blog posts on the research that shows that gluten can actually cause vitiligo. And so what I'm going to do here for you is I'm going to pump that link into the feed for you. And give you the answer to that question, because absolutely it can cause vitiligo. I've seen a couple of different things happen. Number one, I've seen it where going gluten-free in somebody with vitiligo, where we'll see not a full reversal of skin pigmentation issues, but we'll see partial, or we'll see some improvement in pigmentation, and we'll see a halting of the progression of the illness. And I've seen cases where if it's early enough, where we'll see people reverse some of their pigmentation problems. So again, going over to glutenfreesociety.org, Michelle, if you check that, glutenfreesociety.org. And so those of you who don't know, that's our foundation, right? That's the Dr. Osborne's foundation. That's one of the tools that we use as we're trying to reach, as Pam answered the answer last week, which is how many people are we trying to reach? We're trying to reach 100 million chronically sick people who have gone through medicine, found no answers, and they're really frustrated. We're trying to reach 100 million people, and that's why we need your help. Yes, vitiligo is an autoimmune condition, but again, going over to glutenfreesociety.org, we have a search box on the website. You can type in any topic, and you can search any topic that you'd like. If you type in vitiligo there, you'll find a ton of information about how gluten is related and can create and contribute to vitiligo, among many other medical conditions as well. So Linda says, I'm on glutamine at the present time via my doc, and would be interested in Dr. Osborne's thoughts. So it depends. Like, glutamine is good. It's a necessary fuel source for the enterocyte, which is the small intestinal cells. But the thing is if you're not deficient in glutamine, it may not be all that beneficial. It depends. I hope your doctor tested you for glutamine, and there's a couple different ways to test for glutamine deficiency. One is through lymphocyte proliferation. You can actually test glutamine concentration within the cells. The other is through plasma amino acid testing, which is also a good way to get an idea of whether or not it's the right move for you. So that would be, I don't like supplementation without testing if somebody's coming to me. Now, if you're out there on the internet trying to do this and you're just trying to figure things out, glutamine is not necessarily going to hurt you. It's not dangerous to take, but where people get into trouble is they try a little of this, they try a little of that, they try a little of this, they hit a plateau, they're not getting better, and then they start getting frustrated, and they think that what they're doing is not going to work. They think that nutrition doesn't work. So I just want to be clear that it's always better to test than to guess. Okay. Next question. What about leaky gut and yeast overgrowth? Yeah, I mean, leaky gut, yeast overgrowth can cause leaky gut. As a matter of fact, there are, oh gosh, how many different ways can we see leaky gut be developed as a result of choices or decisions? So gluten can cause leaky gut. Yeast overgrowth, bacterial overgrowths and abnormalities can cause leaky gut. Glyphosate and pesticide and other forms of pesticide can cause leaky gut. Chlorine can cause leaky gut. Too aggressive exercise can cause leaky gut. Beverages that are too hot that you're drinking consistently can cause leaky gut. Nobody ever talks about that one. That's actually one of the triggers for leaky gut is hot. You're overheating your food and your beverages. So there are a lot of different things. Potatoes have been shown to cause leaky gut. A number of different environmental toxins and food dyes and other chemicals that are added to food, especially the things that are used in gluten-free substitute foods like xanthan gum and carrageenan gum, we know can contribute to intestinal inflammation and leaky gut. So lots of things there on that front. Yeast certainly part of that spectrum. Oh, Nancy, she's reframing her question. Is it better to take a prebiotic or better to take a probiotic? Look, prebiotics are what I call food. You're eating food with fiber. That's where you're getting prebiotics. A lot of people go out and buy expensive prebiotic supplements that oftentimes are not necessary, in my experience, to get good repopulation of the gut flora. I would say better to take a probiotic than a prebiotic. There are exceptions to that rule. But if we're just generalizing, probiotic over prebiotic any day. How does gluten withdrawal compare to caffeine withdrawal, which is more painful? That's a great question, Huda. And I think the true answer to that differs from person to person. Caffeine withdrawal is generally not as long. We'll see caffeine withdrawal kind of be done within about a week period of time. So whereas gluten can take 2 to 4 weeks, I think the opiate component of it is just a lot more hard. It can be a lot more challenging to kick versus caffeine. So caffeine withdrawal symptoms usually last about a week. Gluten withdrawal, if it's bad enough, can last for up to a month. So I've got to say that gluten withdrawal has got to be a bigger problem. Now, some people with caffeine withdrawal will suffer with major headaches. And so from which one is more painful, again, that's unique to the person's experience. So, yeah, so, that, again, hopefully that helps answer your question. I don't know what you mean, Jackie Walburn. You're asking about adaptogens. You just want a general synopsis on all adaptogens? Because that's a pretty big topic. So maybe clarify that and dial that question in a little bit for me, and I can get you a better answer or more specific to what your needs are. Oh, Gabriella, thanks, from Peru. We've got people from all continents tonight, from all over the world tonight listening. I love that. This is a great show. Okay, I like this. Mamie, I hope I'm saying your name right. Mamie Mitchell. I'm celiac and Hashimoto's. I'm having a hard time with the season change, being more tired and more on edge. I'm taking Armor and D3 and a mix of B vitamins. Is there anything I can do to help make it through the day? So if you're struggling with the season change, there are a couple different things that you can do. And again, depending on where you're at in the world, because I don't know where you're at, because some people go through daylight savings time or fall back, if you will. Some people don't. But one of the things that you can do is get more sunshine. One of the biggest challenges people have with the season change is the diminished quality of sunshine. So a sun lamp can be very effective in this regard. A sun lamp, meaning, and you can go pick those up on Amazon, but they're lamps that help your eyes produce melatonin, and that can help you get a deeper sleep. Because what happens for a lot of people is when the sun changes, when the season changes, we get less sunshine, we get less sunshine exposure on our optic nerve, and that leads to melatonin deficiency that can cause less restful sleep. So we don't get deep sleep and we can wake up really tired. So that would be kind of the first, just really common sense thing that you could do. The other thing is pick up a bottle of Ultra Nutrients. Ultra Nutrients is our premium gluten-free, grain-free multivitamin. And sometimes you're on vitamin D and a mix of B vitamins, but you may not be getting enough. And so a multivitamin might be better for your energy overall, especially with your history of celiac. There could be some malabsorption issues where you're starting from really low levels of energy as a result of low levels of nutrient absorption. Also have your doctor check your iron level. You may have anemia, and refractory anemia from celiac disease is a very common thing. And if you have iron deficiency anemia, that's as simple as eating more liver and potentially taking an iron supplement. And you guys are asking some great questions tonight. So let's see here. Looks like I answered that question already. Carol, glad that you're learning a lot from what we talk about in the show. Super happy that we're able to help you, that I'm able to help you with what we're talking about. Let's see here. Here's Connie chiming in. I had fatigue, joint pain, bloated, but when I went without, it was a real mess for about 5 days. Thanks to a friend to coach me through, as I had bad withdrawal. I almost ate a piece of bread just to feel better, but she talked me out of it one more day. That was the day I finally slept and felt fantastic when I woke up. Pain gone, energy like crazy, felt alive again. Connie, thank you so much for sharing that. And one of the reasons I put that up is because it's very important that you have support group around you. If you're going through gluten withdrawal, you don't want the person who's weak-willed, who's going to say, oh, just have a little piece of bread, you'll feel better. That is the opposite of the person you want around you. Just like if you're an alcoholic and you're trying to kick it, you want to go to a facility where there are other people who are not going to, potentially give you alcohol. Gluten withdrawal can be just as aggressive as alcohol addiction. So you want to have great support around you. So when you're going gluten-free, it's very important, whoever you're living with, whether it's mom and dad or whether it's husband or wife or whether it's brothers and sisters, just have a meeting. Let them know, look, I may be going through these withdrawal symptoms and I need your support 100%. Don't let me cave. Please, please, please help support me as I go through this trying time. Annalise is asking, why can't some celiacs eat oats, but some can? It makes me sick, even if it's gluten-free oats. Look, the reality is you've been misinformed, Annalise, and this is where I really encourage you to read No Grain, No Pain. There's no such thing as a gluten-free oat. The name of the gluten in oats is avenin, and it can cause intestinal inflammation and damage. The celiacs, remember, the celiacs who are probably eating oats and not hurting as a result of eating oats are probably having more of a silent type of inflammation as a result of their exposure. There have been studies that show that 92% of celiacs do not have a reduction in gastrointestinal inflammation unless they go grain-free. And that's one of the reasons why I wrote No Grain, No Pain, was to shed that light into the world, because so many people are being told that get that celiac diagnosis. So many of them are being told, yeah, eat all the oatmeal you want, eat the oatmeal bars, eat the the General Mills cereals that are, oat-based, like Cheerios. And interestingly enough, Cheerios, it was about a year and a half ago, they came out and they were actually being cross-contaminated with gluten. And then here more recently, a number of different products, oat-based products, were found to contain glyphosate, which is another issue entirely. Glyphosate is not gluten, but glyphosate can cause gluten-like symptoms for many people. And so a lot of times people have trouble with both. They're gluten sensitive, but they're also being poisoned by the glyphosate, which is found in a lot of our different cereal-based products, including the oats, the corn, the rice, etc. So Melanie says, my husband has celiac, and while I make him all gluten-free food, I still eat gluten, and it makes me feel terrible. Well, then, Melanie, that's your cue. Get you a copy of No Grain, No Pain and start making the right moves with your diet. There's 3 dietary rules I like to share, and that is you can't get healthy eating food that's not healthy. That's rule number 1. It's the common sense rule. And the Halloween being a couple days away for many of us, going and gorging on candy does not beget good health. So keep that in mind as we're going into this season of self-destruction through social engineered justification of eating garbage. But the other thing there is rule number 2, which is listen to your body. If you feel bad when you eat it, stop eating it. It's a simple rule to follow. And rule number 3 is if you're allergic to something, don't eat it. And that's where you really need to get tested to figure that part out. Let's see. Kelly says, gluten-free for 8 weeks, I lost half a shoe size. I believe it, Kelly. Especially if you were swelling and you had edema in your ankles and in your feet. I've seen that be the case. Marie says, it helped me with joint pain, no more taking puffers, no more sinus infection, lost weight, no more migraines. But the biggest is preventing me from getting a neurological disease I'm not sure who that is, who died from ALS. So a family member, I'm assuming, maybe passed away from ALS. I lost my stepfather to ALS before I was formally trained, so I didn't have the ability or the knowledge to really be able to help him. So very devastating illness. Let's see here. I think I answered or caught up to answering a lot of these questions, but let's go back up. We got more of it. I tell you what, I think Canada is in charge tonight. They're really winning the race here in terms of how many people are tuning in from different places. Canada is being very well represented. Yeah, Nora's working on cutting rice out of the diet, replacing it with cauliflower rice. That's a smart move. And cauliflower rice tastes pretty darn good, if I say so myself. Yeah, so Mamie's chiming back in. Vitamin D3, 5,000 units a day if your levels are extremely low, and I'm talking about under 20 or really under 30. 5,000 units a day will not correct that deficiency. 8 to 10,000 units a day is necessary to correct really low levels of D, especially in somebody who's chronically ill, because the chronically ill, especially with autoimmune disease, they require more vitamin D for healing, repair, and recovery. So to get it actually up there, you've got to take a much stronger dose than that. And it's safe to do. A lot of people get scared because they've been told by somebody that vitamin D is somehow toxic because it's fat soluble, which that is not true. Water, you're more likely to drown from over drinking water than you are to die from vitamin D toxicity, unless there's one caveat. People with kidney damage, kidney disease, kidney failure should not be taking high doses of vitamin D. Another question. My doctor did a test and stated my TSH was normal, but I was low on T3, T4, so she has me on Armour for a few months to see how I do. My old doctor always tested my TSH, and it was always normal, and continued to increase my thyroid and had no issues. Do you know any cases where the TSH never is low or high but still have issues? Yeah, TSH can be extremely normal, and T3 and T4 are low, then you can have a conversion problem, or you could have a nutritional problem. There are a lot of reasons why T4 might be low. I did a pretty extensive article. If you go to glutenfreestudy.org and check out thyroid disease in the search feature, and I talked about how in order to properly make T4, you need iodine, you need vitamin B2, you need vitamin C, you need vitamin B12, and you need zinc. And to convert T4 to T3, you need selenium and iron. And for T3 to talk to your cells, you need vitamin A and vitamin D and omega-3 fatty acids. So if you're not having those levels of nutrients measured, you can still have an underactive thyroid, but not have an abnormal TSH. That's what we call a nutritional thyroid problem. Very, very common. Yeah, Sandra, gluten can cause you to lose weight. Can I elaborate? Yeah, so one of the things that gluten can do, and again, there's two spectrums on this. There's the gluten weight gain club and there's the gluten weight loss club. Some people, gluten damages the gut itself, and it can cause, for celiacs particularly, it can cause something called villus atrophy, although I've seen cases where gluten-induced inflammatory bowel syndrome as well, things like Crohn's disease, ulcerative colitis. And so what happens is as the gut is being destroyed, absorption of vitamins, minerals, and other nutrients is hindered. So these people, when you suffer from malabsorption and chronic diarrhea, then you actually lose weight and you start to lose muscle mass. And that is where the weight loss can be quite prolific. I've seen cases of, so some celiacs just can't put the weight on. And one of the reasons why is they're following a traditional gluten-free diet, not a true gluten-free diet. They're avoiding wheat, barley, and rye, but they're eating oats and rice and corn. And so those other grains are doing damage to their guts, leading to perpetual damage that is perpetuating the malabsorption, which is not allowing the body to heal and repair. And so that weight loss can continue. So that hopefully that elaborates enough for you on that topic. Yes, North Dakota. So if you're in the Dakotas, man, all the winter up there, there's something called SAD, seasonal affective disorder, and that's basically it's a sunshine deficiency more than it is a vitamin D deficiency. But a sun lamp can be very, very effective. Just make sure when you're looking it up, Barbara is asking is specific on sun lamps. Look for something that puts out 10,000 LUX, 10,000 illuminations. And that will be effective. It won't help you make vitamin D, but it will help you make melatonin. Now, if you live in those northerly climates, I know a lot of people will call me a heretic for saying this, but if you live in those northerly climates where you get no sunshine for 6 months on end, a tanning bed is not a bad idea. And I'm not talking about going in to tan. I'm talking about going in to get short bursts of UV radiation so that your skin can produce vitamin D. Either that or take a vacation in the summer months and go somewhere south where you're not going to be so subjected to that long bout of winter. But that can be a very effective tool to help overcome some of the weather changes that can come when you're far up north. And getting in a tanning bed is not dangerous unless you're doing it every day and you're doing it and you're burning your skin and you're overdoing it basically. But if you get in, during those deep winters, if you tanned in a tanning bed for 3 to 4 minutes a couple of times a week just to get some UV exposure to produce vitamin D in your skin naturally, there's nothing super dangerous about doing that. Now, some people would argue, what about the EMF that the tanning bulbs and the tanning bed can put out? Well, we're exposed to EMF all the time, and unless you're super ultra EMF sensitive and battling with chronic illness, now if that's the case, if you're EMF sensitive and battling chronic illness, it's not a good idea. But if you're just trying to get through the winter, there's no harm in doing that. How do you know if you have a leaky gut? You don't. You get tested. That's, again, there are multiple different causes of leaky gut. So you get tested for the things that can cause leaky gut. That's the best way to discern that. Let's see here. Ruth is asking, does the genetic gluten test tell you if you are predisposed to gluten, or does it confirm if you are gluten intolerant or sensitive? So understand that, okay, genetic testing. So those of you who don't understand genetic testing, pay attention. Genetic testing for gluten sensitivity, knowing that you have the genes for gluten sensitivity means that if you expose yourself to gluten, those genes will turn on. So having gluten sensitive genes, it doesn't mean you get celiac disease, and it doesn't mean that you have illness, because gluten sensitivity is not a disease. Gluten sensitivity is a state of genetics. You either have the genes or you don't. If you do, what activates the genes to produce inflammation is exposure to gluten. So you can have the genes, and if you're not eating gluten, you don't have to worry about the gluten-induced damage, because, again, you're not turning and activating those genes to produce inflammation to go after that gluten. So hopefully that's helpful, Ruth. If that didn't clarify, re-ask it in a different way, and I'll try to do my best to clarify it better for you. Dee says, been gluten-free for 11 years. I don't miss anything that contains gluten except for baklava. That, you know what? I got to say, that's a pretty darn good dish. And I would agree. There are certain things that I would like to eat, but again, I don't know so much miss it, but from the perspective of, if we were going to want something, what would you choose? That's an interesting question, because I'm more of a stoic person when it comes to food. I could walk away from it if I know it's not good for me and I don't even think about it or worry about it. But it makes for great conversation, right? And I'm glad you chimed that in. So let's just ask that question. Of all of you listening tonight, if you could have like one free pass, what would you pick to eat? Like, what would be the thing that you would pick to eat? Just curious. And I think it'd be fun to kind of entertain that question at least a little bit. Okay, and I'll wait for those answers to come in. Veronica says, how do you prepare liver? I was deficient in biotin. I've never eaten liver. You can fry it. Some people fry it in oil with like a little bit of tapioca or a little bit of almond flour, coconut flour mixture. Arrowroot also works well. Some people grind liver up with a meat grinder and put it in ground beef or put it in other ground meats. That way they're not eating just liver, because some people, if you don't eat liver or haven't eaten organ meats, the taste is very different. The texture is very different. Some people can't get over that texture and taste psychologically, so it freaks them out. So, kind of masking it in soups or stews, masking it in other like ground meat can be one good way to get some in you. Okay, let's see here. I think I got to those questions already. Love that. Deanna says, finish the vitamin D protocol. Thanks so much, Dr. Osborne. You're welcome, Deanna. Those of you who don't know what that is, look, this is one of the best ways to overcome a cold or a flu. If you don't know about the vitamin D protocol, glutenfreesociety.org, type in vitamin D protocol. Basically, it's 150,000 units a day for 3 days. Depending on your body weight, there's some subtle variances, but we have a protocol sheet at glutenfreesociety.org. And so it can be one of the most effective ways during cold and flu season to boost immune function, especially if you've been told by your doc that you have a problem with vitamin D levels being low. It's a great way. I use it as a flu shot remedy. Instead of, I don't believe in the flu shot or trust that the flu shot will work, but vitamin D works like a charm. Let's see here. I like this question. Michelle says, how often should you have it wouldn't be a gastroscopy, it would be an endoscopy. And I just say that for clarity of everyone else, Michelle, I'm not trying to pick on you. To see that the villi have grown back. Well, that depends. Your GI doctor might, for many people, they'll want to recheck it in 6 months to a year, and then they'll want to check it again, depending on what they find in a follow-up test. But you're going to get very different opinions, but 6 months to 12 months is a pretty common opinion that you might hear back from if you've got a celiac diagnosis with villus atrophy confirmation. The problem with a biopsy, and I think it's important to point this out, biopsies are not accurate. When you get a confirmed diagnosis, understand that you were very fortunate and very lucky. Most biopsies come back false negative, and that's because your surface area of your small intestine is about 22 feet. And when we do a biopsy, what we're actually doing is taking a microscopic cross-section of a few different areas of the small intestine and then looking at that small, tiny microscopic cross-section of 22 feet under a microscope. And if the area that we took as a biopsy doesn't show damage, it doesn't mean there's not damage in other areas. It just simply means there's not damage in the area that was investigated. So, you could have a biopsy that is abnormal, and then you could have a follow-up biopsy that is normal, but is still abnormal because the secondary tissue that they came and grabbed didn't show the damage. It doesn't mean the damage is not there. So I have my opinion on biopsies is I don't really like to use them as gold standards of knowing whether or not a person is getting better or not. But a lot of gastroenterologists, that's what they use as a gold standard. So, 6 to 12 months, again, to answer your question. Shelly says, read your book. I'm gluten, grain, dairy free. How do you feel about cassava? Overcoming autoimmune is like a roller coaster. That's a very good analogy. It is. It's ups and downs. Tanning bed makes me itch for a week. You're probably intolerant to that because you don't have an adequate, strong enough antioxidant system yet to overcome the UV damage or the UV rays themselves. So if you're struggling because you're overcoming an autoimmune disease, your nutritional status might not be strong enough. One of the things that we can do to protect ourselves from UV damage is make sure we have strong levels of antioxidants. So eating pigmented foods, things like blueberries, blackberries, raspberries, strawberries, where you see the dark blues and the reds, those pigments in the foods themselves, they're several different kinds. There's proanthocyanidins and other chemicals. They actually give your skin protection from UV damage. And so the more you get your diet dialed in, the more you kind of get on the other side, the better you're going to be able to tolerate sun. I've had people say, I can't go out in the sun. I'm allergic to the sun, or I'm so sensitive to the sun, I can't tolerate it. And the reason is because they don't eat right. And when they start eating right, they're able to better and better tolerate sun exposure. So a big part of it is just getting the diet dialed in. Now, my thoughts on cassava, you can overdo cassava. It's a very highly glycemic root vegetable, and a lot of people will use it, like the cassava tortillas and tortilla chips and things of that nature. Look, don't use it as a staple food in your diet if you're struggling with weight loss issues, or you're struggling with yeast overgrowth, or you're struggling with like metabolic syndrome where you have blood sugar problems and you're trying to get those regulated, because it's highly glycemic. It's going to make that part more of a challenge. But if you're eating it on the occasion, there's nothing wrong with that. So Dana, I'm going to say this out of love and not out of for any other reason, because I like your comment. And I think it's important. My daughter and I both suffer with celiac. It's very hard on a teenager. I get it. It's socially more challenging. But here you have this wonderful opportunity. And I want you to think about it this way, Dana. We live in a world, for the first time in our history, we live in a world where it's socially acceptable to kill ourselves with food. And, your teenager goes out and with all her friends and buddies, they're all eating horrifically. They're all eating garbage. They're all eating junk. And so when teenagers get and they hang around with each other, they all want to kind of be like each other. And there's that, again, that peer group pressure, if you will, that is involved with that. And for that reason, it can be hard on a teenager. But I don't like to look at it as, oh, poor kid, they gotta eat right. They gotta be healthy, right? Because I look at it differently. It's like having a diet where we say, okay, we're restricted, we can't eat certain foods, is kind of, in our psychology, it's creating a restriction that sets up ourselves psychologically for failure. And the way I'd rather have people look at it is just a twist of words, is basically, you're not restricting your diet. you're freeing yourself from the bondage of illness. And you really want to hammer that message home with your daughter, and together, the both of you supporting each other is going to be a fantastic outcome, I'm certain. But sharing that message with her versus the, I know it's hard and poor you, because when people are put in the role of a victim mentality where they feel like they don't have control and they can't do anything about it, that generally psychologically tends to feed into the illness. So I pointed out for that reason. Again, I think trying to approach it from that other direction is in my experience, a lot more successful. Rubia asks, can gluten cause autonomic dysfunction? Yes, very much so. It can cause dysautonomia, something called reflex sympathetic dystrophy. I've seen a number of cases of those types of conditions improve dramatically on a gluten grain-free diet. Let's see here. Best egg replacement in recipes, probably chia gel in terms of consistency and texture. So soaking chia seeds and scraping that gel from the chia seeds can be an effective egg substitute. There are a number of cookbooks, vegetarian cookbooks, that use that, where you can find those recipes to be able to make that yourself at home with organic, non-GMO, and non-glyphosate sprayed. Okay, so I'm getting into the answers now. New York pizza. So what would we eat if we could have a free day? I get New York pizza, donuts. I don't know what NAFE is, Rita. NAFE, K-N-A-F-E. I've never heard of that one. Homemade pie. Mexican food, 100%. I'm from Texas, where Tex-Mex is like, you know, that's what everybody grows up on around here. Pizza, sourdough bread, pizza, a lot of pizzas, freshly baked white bread, croissants, butter tarts, pizza, corn chips, white pizza from a New York pizzeria. So a couple of New Yorkers. Cake, devil's food cake. Okay, baguette. A true San Francisco sourdough. Okay, yeah, there's a bakery there. I don't remember the name. I went to it years ago when I was on holiday. Pizza, croissant, pizza bread, chocolate ice cream with brownies, chocolate chips slathered in chocolate syrup. Wow, Teresa, I'm going to say you're a chocolate fan. Dana says, I miss biscuits and pastries. Freshly baked German rye bread or pumpernickel bread. Yum. Hey, those of you who don't know, on that bread note, we've got Warrior Bread is coming out in a couple of weeks. I announced it about 3 weeks ago, but it's called Warrior Bread. If you go to Gluten Free Society right now and pre-order, you can save a couple of dollars on a bag and try it out. But it is low glycemic. It's actually fantastic. We've been going to town in our test kitchen trying to come up with new ideas. And so again, it's called Warrior Bread. You can check it out. If you're missing bread, it's going to be the real deal for you. Pasta, cheesecake. Yeah, cheesecake's one of my favorites too. Sourdough bread, a lot of sourdough breads. Chicken Kiev, chocolate cake with ice cream. Now I'm hungry, Dana says. Cherry pie. Oh, man. Yeah, so it's again, a fun conversation anyway, right? So, no, phone's ringing. I got to turn it off. So, all right. Any other questions? We're wrapping up on the time here. Okay, so Anna Palacios says, question by my colleagues, is gamma oryxanol, which the oil from rice bran, as they tell me, because it's not the protein in the bran, it wouldn't be a problem in some supplements. Don't recommend it. Don't play with it. You know, you're making the assumption. Any company that's putting grain-based products in, you know, especially from rice, which is highly contaminated with cadmium and arsenic, just don't recommend it. It's an inferior ingredient to go on a supplement. It's a cheap ingredient, which is why a lot of manufacturers use it, but it's an inferior ingredient. And that, aside from arsenic and cadmium, and even, you know, some studies showing lead, you know, rice does contain a form of gluten, and regardless, you know, gluten is a protein, and they're telling you that it's the rice oil, so there's no protein in it. Well, who verified all that, and who did all the testing, and who did the, you know, the high performance liquid chromatography to make sure that that is actually what they're saying is true, or are they just giving you are they just blowing smoke at you? Okay. Man, we've got so many more questions. I just don't know that I can get to them all. I like that though. Shelly says food for hormones, question mark. We're going to talk about that. That's going to actually be a topic that we're going to be bringing your way here shortly. So stay tuned. If those of you who don't already subscribe, make sure you click that that bell, the reminder bell to get notifications when I do go live. But for those of you who don't know, we're live every Monday night minus holidays and vacations for the Pig Dr. Osborne's Brain Show. I love doing these. I love helping you guys out. Now, I just ask you to return the favor as we wrap up tonight's event. Please do me a favor. Make sure you're sharing this video with somebody who you think might benefit. If you know somebody with autoimmune disease, if you know somebody with celiac disease, please, please, please share this with them, because together we can help more people. Remember, I have a lofty goal, 100 million, and I'm only about 30% there. We've reached about 30 million people over the last 18 years or so, but we've got quite a bit more to go. So I need your help, and you know, you're taking my help, so I'm just asking you to pay it forward to somebody else who could use it as well. I also want you to go, those of you who don't know, make sure you go visit autoimmunerevolution.org, and I'm going to put that up on the screen, autoimmunerevolution.org. Look, this is a summit event, and I've got about 33 world-leading experts on autoimmune disease that are going to be talking on a variety of different topics around autoimmune and how to recover from autoimmune in a natural way, how to overcome autoimmune symptoms and autoimmune problems, how to change your life, change your diet, change your lifestyle, what are some of the most common triggers of autoimmune disease, et cetera, et cetera. Now, I'm doing something very special in this summit too. Actually have put together a very special presentation for those of you who register. It's a 2-hour-long presentation, and it is an autoimmune blueprint. It is the step-by-step, what you need to know, what are all the triggers for autoimmune disease, how to get tested for these different triggers, how to have conversation with your doctor, all those pearls of wisdom of the last really 18 years working with people. So make sure, if you haven't registered, go to autoimmunerevolution.org and go ahead and register. It doesn't cost you anything. It's absolutely free. Again, it's part of my mission to reach 100 million people with the power of diet and lifestyle change. So if you haven't registered, go sign up. If you know somebody who could benefit from it, make sure that you share the event. Again, the more people we can get the information into the hands of, the more people we can help. So we'll see you again next week, 6 p.m. Central Standard Time, by the way, for the Pig Dr. Osborne's Brain Show. Have a great evening.